So the new M1 Max, they're pretty damn good. I mean, hell, the new MacBook Air is actually a decent laptop I would actually recommend to someone to actually buy for once. But then again, $1,000 is still a lot of money I can spend on something else, like a phone, a completely out of stock graphics card or gaming console, or like, I don't know, 1,000 instant ramens or something. But all joking aside, the M1 Max, from what I've seen and the one time I actually used one, are actually pretty damn good. And for once in who knows how long, upgrading to a brand new MacBook in this day and age is honestly not the worst idea in the world. But this video isn't going to be about the M1 Max, because you've probably already seen the hundreds, if not at least, I don't know, 17 different videos that already talked about the M1 Max and whether they're good or not. And since I spent the last of my YouTube paycheck on manga, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be buying one anytime soon. But even if I did have the money to buy one of the new M1 Max, would it actually be worth it, or should I just buy something used? Well, once again, the 2015 13-inch MacBook Pro. What used to be the quote-unquote king of the used budget MacBooks, the best somewhat bang-for-the-buck MacBook that you could buy used. But then again, I did say used to be. So here's the question that no one really asked. Is the 2015 13-inch MacBook Pro actually still good in 2020, or 2021, wherever the hell I released this video? Well, short answer, kind of, but not really. But first, let's have a bit of a history lesson. So back in 2015, Apple released the 2015 MacBook Pros, which was just a spec bump from the 2014 MacBook Pros, which was just a spec bump from the 2013 MacBook Pros, which was just a spec bump from the 2012 MacBook Pros. Wait a minute! That being said, the 2015 MacBook Pros actually did bring a couple new things to the table, such as Thunderbolt 2, the much faster PCI SSDs instead of the old school SATA drives, and the brand new at the time Force Touch trackpad, which instead of being the old style surfboard trackpads on the previous models, this one had a small vibrator that vibrates the entire trackpad every time you click on it. Which, okay, that's cool, but what about the actual MacBook itself? Well, first of all, the build quality. Even being 5 years old at this point, it's, well, still a MacBook. I mean, I really don't know what you're expecting. I mean, this thing is still a very well built machine, especially compared to brand new Windows laptops at the time, and now at the same price point. And also, I mean, if there's one thing that Apple almost always gets right of their products, is the build quality of their products. Having a very well built sturdy aluminum chassis that weighs about 3.48 pounds or 1.58 kilograms, this MacBook is still a very sleek and modern machine, but granted, it is somewhat becoming a bit of a chunky boy by today's standards. But I mean, hey, it still has that light up Apple logo, so it automatically makes it better than literally anything else. Yeah, I'm looking at you, you $2,000 piece of garbage! Disclaimer, this was a complete unfunny joke. I actually do love my 16-inch MacBook Pro, please don't kill me. Now for the inside of the MacBook, we have, well, the keyboard. And honestly, still one of the best keyboards I've ever used in my life. Granted, I haven't used that many laptop keyboards in my life, but I mean, it's still a good keyboard, I guess. Being a MacBook made before the dark times of the MacBook keyboards, this MacBook uses the old style scissor switch keyboards, and dear God, it's still amazing. Having just the right amount of key travel so you actually know when you press the key and it doesn't feel weird. Having pretty good spacing between the keys so your fingers don't get all cramped and stuff. Having a pretty decent backlight so you can actually type in the dark for whatever reason. And compared to the new Magic keyboards of the new Macs, this holds up pretty damn well. Personally, I still think this is better than the Magic keyboard, but honestly, they're both really solid keyboards, so I don't know. And for the trackpad, well, it's not as big as the trackpads on the newer MacBooks, but it's still a trackpad and does exactly what it needs to do. So, thumbs up, I guess? I don't know. Even compared to most Windows laptops, this is just the golden standard for a trackpad on a laptop. Don't even. This is a factual statement, and there's no other statement. Just this is a factual statement. You cannot. I have an opinion, and only my opinion works. Jesus Christ. I mean, just doing the macOS gestures on this thing, it just works. I don't know what it is about macOS and its hand gestures, but they just work on this trackpad. I don't know where I'm going with this. Then for the speakers on the 2015 MacBook Pro, well, they're still speakers and they hold up pretty damn well, and they also act as, air intake ventilation. So that's a win-win situation, I guess. Hold on. Jerry, should we do a sound test? Yeah. All right, I guess we're doing a sound test. Now, I can't give this laptop nothing but praise. If there's actually one thing I actually have a pretty big problem with this MacBook, it's, well, the battery life. And that is honestly the main problem with buying a used 2015 MacBook Pro, or really any used laptop. Even doing something simple like web browsing on YouTube, Netflix, or Handmade. Wait a minute, I should probably delete that. Alright, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, the battery. So even just doing simple web browsing, the battery only lasts about 5 to 7 hours. Now that's definitely not horrible, and granted, this is a nearly 5-year-old battery at this point, but it's certainly not ideal, and I mean, the best part of the new M1 Max is, well, the battery life they have. But then again, this MacBook does have MagSafe, so yeah, worth it. And besides, you can always replace the battery in the 2015 MacBook Pro. Granted, it is glued on to the actual MacBook itself, like any other MacBook made within the last 8 years or so. But MagSafe though. No, not that MagSafe. This MagSafe. The good MagSafe. The one we actually won back. Anyways, next up is, well, the screen the MacBook has. And honestly, yeah, it's still a really damn good display. I really don't know where else is there to talk about. Do I have to rate it? Fine, I'll rate it. So for the display of the 2015 13-inch MacBook Pro, we have a 2560 by 1600 13.3-inch Retina display that's at a ratio of 16:10, and dear god, this display is just amazing to look at. Still having pretty much essentially damn near perfect viewing angles, still very good color accuracy, I guess I really don't have a way of testing that, having virtually no screen flex at all, and overall, this display holds up very well in 2020, and it's gonna stay that way for the nearby future. Even though the screen bezels on this thing are becoming somewhat thick by today's standards, but it still holds up, it's fine. Then for the I/O on this thing, the sweet I/O, we have MagSafe 2, 2 Thunderbolt 2 ports, a Type A USB 3.0 port, a headphone/microphone jack, and then on the other side we have a second USB 3.0 port, HDMI, and an SD card reader, which is kind of strange to see, honestly, but it's comforting to see. I'm looking at you, 16-inch MacBook Pro! You know, why am I even making this video? It should be pretty obvious whether or not this MacBook is actually worth it in 2020. It's not, but also it is. I mean, it's good enough for $500. I don't know. What am I doing in my life? And finally, what actually makes the laptop good or not? The specs. So for the specs of the 2015 13-inch MacBook Pro, we have an Intel i5-5257U, 8GB of DDR3 RAM, Intel 6100 HD graphics with 1.5GB of VRAM, and a 100GB SSD. And of course, you can always buy one with better specs, but of course those will cost more, and granted, most people are probably going to go for the base model since that's the cheapest. And that goes the same with the storage on this thing. You can buy a MacBook that already has more storage pre-installed on it, or you can buy an M.2 SSD with an adapter and just, you know, DIY it yourself, or buy an actual used MacBook SSD off eBay somewhere. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to keep the 120GB SSD that's already pre-installed on this thing, so your mileage may vary, or not, but who knows. Now for the benchmarks we're going to be running on this thing, we're just doing the same macOS benchmarks you've probably already seen before, those being the Geekbench test, the Cinebench run, and a Unigine Heaven run for the heck of it, so here you go. Definitely not the most impressive scores, even back in 2015, but for the pricing and buy one of these things used, it's still okay for 2020, I guess. But what's it actually like to use this thing? Well, still pretty damn good. I mean, I did use this laptop as my daily driver for more or less 2 years or so to run my YouTube channel and for schoolwork, and back then and to this day, it still runs perfectly fine. Web browsing is just a breeze, typing up documents and essays on this keyboard is just a cinch, and even some light Minecraft can still run on this thing. Granted, you do have to turn on settings, but it still runs, I guess. And even video editing on this thing is honestly not that bad. I can still open up Final Cut Pro and do a simple 1080p video on this thing and it still runs perfectly fine. Granted, it's not going to be as fast as my 16-inch MacBook Pro due to the dual-core CPU in this thing, but I can still handle simple 1080p videos with no problem. So now we're back to the main question of the video. Is the 2015 13-inch MacBook Pro actually still worth it in 2020? Or 2021, or whatever the hell you watch this video? Short answer, yes, but with a very large asterisk. The thing is, what makes this laptop still such a compelling buy even though it's nearly 5 years old at this point, is the fact that almost everyone in the Apple community considers this to be the last quote-unquote good MacBook, and that's for good reason. It has that amazing keyboard that almost everyone to this day considers to be the golden standard for all keyboards on any laptop. It actually has ports. It's the last MacBook that has MagSafe, which actually can save your laptop if you accidentally trip on your cord. But with the introduction of the ARM M1 MacBooks, or Macs in general, and the pretty damn good performance and battery life they give you, it makes literally almost any used Intel Mac just not that good anymore. I mean, here's the thing. If you're looking for a budget laptop just to do some simple web browsing, schoolwork, and hell, even some simple video editing or Photoshop, for the price that you can get these things, which is around $500 if you look hard enough, this is still a great budget MacBook. If I had to choose as my very first MacBook or just laptop in general between either this or the M1 MacBook Air, I would probably still go with the 2015 13-inch MacBook Pro. Sure, it may be a bit slower and the battery life is definitely not great, but for literally half the price and it still gives you pretty decent performance, I think that's a decent trade-off. But another trade-off when buying this laptop or really any Intel Mac is, well, actual support from Apple. Since the latest OS, that being macOS Big Sur as the time of recording this video, is mainly built around the M1 ARM architecture of the new M1 Macs, sooner or later only those ARM Macs will be supported from Apple. Granted, that's going to be a very long time from now, but that's eventually going to happen one way or another. And plus, you gotta know, this is a 5-year-old laptop already, so one way or another, this laptop is eventually going to get outdated. So for a budget MacBook for around $500, the 2015 13-inch MacBook Pro is still a decent option for people on the lookout for a somewhat cheap MacBook. So overall, the bottom line of this video is, if you're on a tight budget, buy a used 2015 13-inch MacBook Pro. But if you're willing to wait and save up a bit more money, you can probably buy a used M1 Mac in the nearby future for $200 to $300 less than MSRP. So if you're willing to wait, I guess do that. But if not, I guess go buy a 2015 13-inch MacBook Pro. God damn it!